You're listening to Quantum Harry the Podcast, a podcast version of the book Quantum Harry, A Unified Theory of the Potterverse by B.L. Purdom. Episode 30, Harry and Tarot. Welcome to Part 3 of Quantum Harry the Podcast, the Tarot episodes. Part 1 consisted of episodes 1 through 9, the podcast equivalent of the introduction to the book Quantum Harry, and then the archetype episodes, which laid out both the major archetypes that appear in the books and the archetype ruling each book in the series, which will become even more important as we move into Part 3 of Quantum Harry. In Part 2, the game episodes, 10 through 29, I looked at the role of games, toys, sweets, and fairy tales in the 7 books in the series. If you missed any of the episodes that came before episode 30, you should go back. Anytime you want to listen or re-listen to any episode, just go to the Quantum Harry Twitter page at QHPodcast and click on the link in the pinned tweet to go to the Quantum Harry episode guide, which has links to all of the episodes in audio and video formats, plus links to blog posts related to some of the episodes. In the next 11 episodes, I'll examine the role of the Tarot Major Arcana in the 7 Harry Potter books. However, before getting into how tarot imagery can illuminate each of the books, let's look very briefly at an overview of the history of the tarot. J.K. Rowling never tells her readers about Harry Potter learning about tarot, nor is it ever mentioned during his divination lessons. Despite this, Professor Trelawney abruptly reappears in Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, even though she's no longer Harry's teacher by the time he's in his 6th year. In just about every appearance she makes in the 6th book, she's raving about the Tower, the 16th card in the Tarot Major Arcana. And if you don't know what that means, I'll get to that in a couple of minutes. Trelawney ranting about this card is the first overt mention of tarot in the 7 books, and it's a virtual throwaway. It is not, however, the first mention of the name of a tarot card in the series. In Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, Rowling calls the Little Hangleton pub frequented by Frank Bryce, the caretaker at the Riddle House, the Hanged Man. This is the name of the 12th card in the Tarot Major Arcana. J.K. Rowling has also invented her own set of cards, if you will. Famous wizard cards, which are included in chocolate frog packages. The first card of this type that we see in the series is the one bearing the image of Albus Dumbledore, which can be considered equivalent to card number 1 in the Tarot Major Arcana, the Magician. Another non-obvious nod to tarot in the Harry Potter books could be the character of Peeves, particularly the way he seems to appear randomly in the books. In addition to this, many readers may have wondered while they were reading the 7th book, when did this turn into a road movie? I hope that I've helped to shed some light on that authorial decision in episodes 8 and 9 when I talked about the archetype ruling Deathly Hallows, as well as making some of Rowling's choices less mysterious by examining the series as a collection of games that Harry plays, and by looking at the role that toys, sweets, and fairy tales play in the plot. Many elements of the story are also clearer when they're viewed through the lens of the tarot, which will become evident as I progress through the 7 books and the tarot cards linked to each book. Fortune-telling is not the only function for tarot cards, or even their original function. The cards first appeared in early 15th century Italy for playing games. Another name for the Tarot Major Arcana are the Trumps, and no, I'm not going to mention a you-know-who besides Voldemort. I refuse to let anyone ruin that word for me. This comes from the Italian word trionfi, Trionfi, which means triumph. These cards were originally a depiction in 2 dimensions of the popular triumph parades in medieval Italy that were a regular part of festival days, especially during Carnival or Mardi Gras, but also for weddings and other special occasions. In these processions, one character after another is presented, each trumping or triumphing over the preceding one. In the Tarot, History, Symbolism, and Divination, Robert M. Place writes, "In ancient Rome, when a conquering general would return to the city, a triumph would be arranged down Appian Way. The parade was organized from the lowest to the highest, starting with the captives and ending with the general himself. Triumphs were also held as religious processions before games and at Roman funerals." The most ancient traces of triumphal parades of this sort are on Etruscan funeral urns from the 3rd and 4th centuries BCE, which may have been the inspiration for the spectacles that were staged during the time of the Roman Empire. Holy Roman Emperor Frederick II, whose dates are 1194 to 1250, is credited with repopularizing the triumph after his victory over Milan in 1237, when he played the hero in a reenactment of a typical Roman triumphal procession. By the 14th century, about 100 years later, triumphs had become a regular event at festivals throughout Italy, and these public performances reached their peak in the 15th century, about another 100 years on, roughly the same time that the first tarot decks were being developed. A dividing line between high art and popular art wasn't very well drawn in Europe at that time, and some of the most exalted artists of the day worked on the setting, the costumes, the displays, and the poetic symbolic content of the triumphs. Those who were staging the parades were on a constant hunt for ways to increase the pageantry, and poets, most notably Petrarch in his poem I Trionfi, used this cultural vocabulary in philosophical works to depict the soul's journey, which is only fitting, since the triumph, which was originally depicted on Etruscan funeral urns, represented this type of symbolic journey from the very start. Only in the 19th century did tarot begin to be used for cartomancy, which is what you call fortune-telling with cards. Games that include trumps and tricks, similar to the game of bridge, can be played with the full set of tarot cards, although some tarot games use fewer cards than the complete deck. Each suit of cards in the Tarot Minor Arcana is numbered from 1 to 10, and after that there are 4 face cards, rather than the 3 in modern decks of playing cards, King, Queen, and Jack. The Minor Arcana also has a King and Queen, but the other face cards are the Knight and the Page. Some people think that the Knight morphed into the Jack on modern playing cards and the Page simply disappeared, while some think the Page became the Jack and it was the Knight that disappeared from the deck. And some people think that the Knight and the Page were combined to create the Jack. It's not really clear what happened there, and it's not necessary for us to solve that mystery to talk about the Major Arcana. A full tarot deck is a combination of the 22 cards of the Tarot Major Arcana plus the 56 cards of the Minor Arcana, the suits of which are wands, swords, cups, and pentacles, which are sometimes called coins or discs. These suits have become clubs, spades, hearts, and diamonds in modern decks of cards. The symbols for the Tarot Minor Arcana suits are also seen on some of the Tarot Major Arcana cards, and the Major Arcana itself is also considered to be a 5th suit of the tarot deck when games are played with the full deck. Even as people in 15th century Italy witnessed Trionfi and used tarot cards, the 2-dimensional version of Trionfi, to play games, they knew that both the parades and the decks of cards told a story. Carl Jung recognized that the tarot, quote, had its origin and anticipation in profound patterns of the collective unconscious. As the Jungian scholar Joseph Campbell observed, one of the most common myths or folktales found in all cultures is the spiritual quest for enlightenment, a quest that he labeled the hero's journey. The tarot embodies this archetypal quest. Leaving out the Fool card for now, which is unnumbered when it's used as a playing card, just as jokers are unnumbered in modern decks of playing cards, but labeled 0 or 22 when it's used in divination, the other 21 cards in the Tarot Major Arcana can describe a journey from an unformed personality to wholeness and integration, symbolized by the 21st card in the Major Arcana, the World, which may have been very appealing to people when the cards first began to be used for divination. Rowling depicts Harry on just such a journey, and presents wholeness as an ideal throughout the 7-book series, which is another way that her story dovetails neatly with the Tarot Major Arcana as a set of symbols. The Tarot Major Arcana cards, other than the Fool, can be arranged in 3 rows of 7 cards each, a grid of 21 cards, which will be important for this exploration of tarot symbolism in the Harry Potter books. As I mentioned earlier, these 21 cards can also shed light on why some plot elements appear in the books when they do, or why they appear at all. However, even though he doesn't fit into this grid of cards, we can't ignore the Fool entirely. In some tarot games, the Fool is called the excuse or excuse, and this card may be played on any trick, which means a player is expected to follow suit or play a card of the same suit as the other players, but the Fool gives him an excuse. You can play this card instead, which is handy if you don't have the required suit of cards in your hand. The modern equivalent is games in which some cards are called wild and stand in for other cards. The Fool is always wild. In Jung and Tarot, An Archetypal Journey, her book on tarot archetypes, Sally Nichols writes, "The Fool, whose designation is 0, can also burst unexpectedly into our personal life with the result that we end up playing the Fool ourselves." In terms of Harry's story, for instance, Peeves appears when Harry least wants him to, singing songs, throwing things, and making Harry feel like the Fool. As with the Fool in tarot games, Rowling can play Peeves at any time. She may be referencing card games or links to the Fool card for divination, or for storytelling, or a combination of these things. All of them actually fit Peeves very well. It's not surprising that the filmmakers decided that they couldn't find a way to fit Peeves into the Harry Potter films. But just as when Peeves teases Harry on the way to a detention with Umbridge, when he asks Harry if he's, quote, seeing visions, hearing voices, or speaking in tongues, which are all related to ecstatic religious experience, and Harry is caught up in a religious war in Order of the Phoenix, as I talk about in episodes 20 through 22, Peeves can give us hints about what's really going on in the story, and his actions sometimes have an impact even several books later, such as when he smashes the vanishing cabinet in the 2nd book to serve as a distraction for Harry to escape Filch's clutches, and then this cabinet has to be repaired by Draco in the 6th book for Death Eaters to enter the castle. Peeves is definitely more than he appears to be. But the filmmakers never quite got the purpose of a character who's basically the equivalent of the Fool card in the Major Arcana, so when it came to the film scripts, he didn't make the cut. Often, when tarot cards are used for storytelling, the Fool is cast as the protagonist or the central character. Though Harry is sometimes in the role of the Fool, this isn't the tarot archetype that best describes his character. The lover of the 6th Major Arcana card, which is equivalent to the archetypal youth, as I talked about in episode 7, Fountain of Youth, may also fill the role of the protagonist in the tarot story. But while Harry does fit the youth archetype's gender and age designations, and he also fits the tarot lover archetype, Rowling doesn't seem to be doing this either. Her hero is the liminal being, specifically the metaphorically queer liminal being, which is equivalent to the stranger in George R.R. Martin's Game of Thrones series, the aspect of the 7-faced god that has no gender or age associated with it, as I talked about in episodes 8 and 9. This archetype is also equivalent to the 7th card in the Tarot Major Arcana, the Chariot, which is fitting due to this archetype's ability to straddle worlds, which is what the liminal being always does. It is the very nature of liminality. When we put the 21 cards in the Tarot Major Arcana other than the Fool into our 3 rows of 7 cards each, or 3 realms and 7 columns, we can align each column with one of the Harry Potter books. The first 7 cards go across the top row, cards 1 through 7, which have equivalents in the 7 archetypes ruling each book in the series that I talked about in episodes 2 through 9. These cards are in order: the Magician, the High Priestess, the Empress, the Emperor, the High Priest or Pope or Hierophant, which means High Priest, the Lovers, and the Chariot. The second row below that has cards 8 through 14, Justice, the Hermit, the Wheel of Fortune, Strength or Force, the Hanged Man, Death, and Temperance. And finally, the bottom row has cards 15 through 21, the Devil, the Tower, also called the Tower of Destruction, the Star, the Moon, the Sun, Judgment, and the World. When someone is using these cards to tell a story, certain cards can be considered seed cards because they herald a new stage of growth in the story, and they're equal to the sum of all of the cards that came before them. Plus, the number of the seed card in question can always also be reduced to the number 1. For instance, the first few seed cards are the Magician, card number 1, the fourth card, the Emperor, because the numbers 1 through 4 add up to 10, and the digits of 10, 1 and 0, add up to 1. The seventh card, the Chariot, is also a seed card, since 1 through 7 adds up to 28, and those digits add up to 10, 2 and 8, and those digits 1 and 0, again, add up to 1. So in addition to the vertical columns, we get 7 other divisions of these cards, 7 sequential sets that also represent the 7 stages in Harry's story. In order, stage 1 is the Magician, the High Priestess, and the Empress. Stage 2 is the Emperor, the High Priest, and the Lovers. Stage 3 is the Chariot, Justice, and the Hermit. Stage 4 is the Wheel of Fortune, Strength, and the Hanged Man. Stage 5 is Death, Temperance, and the Devil. Stage 6 is the Tower of Destruction, the Star, and the Moon. And Stage 7 is the Sun, Judgment, and the World. The 7th book in J.K. Rowling's series, Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, juxtaposes Hallows versus Horcruxes, with 3 Hallows at issue and 7 Horcruxes, including Harry. Examining the story through the lens of tarot makes it impossible not to notice that 3 times 7 is 21, the number of cards in this tarot grid that can be used to describe Harry's journey to wholeness. Each card in the Tarot Major Arcana is also related, numerically, to at least one other card, and some are related to 2 cards. The digits in the number of each card can be added together to get the number of another card to which it's related, or, going backward in the process, the number of the card can be broken down into 2 digits that refer to another card. For instance, the Magician card is number 1. This links it to card number 10, the Wheel of Fortune, because 1 plus 0 equals 1, and it's also linked to card 19, the Sun, because the digits of the Sun card, 1 and 9, add up to 10, and then the digits in the number 10, 1 and 0, add up to 1, which takes us back to card number 1, the Magician. The High Priestess, card number 2, is linked to card 11, Strength, because 1 plus 1 is 2, and it's linked to card 20, Judgment, because 2 plus 0 is 2, etc., etc. You'll get the idea as I continue. So under this system, the Empress, card number 3, the Hanged Man, card number 12, and the World, card number 21, all add up to 3. And the Emperor, card number 4, Death, card number 13, and the Fool, card number 22 when it's not called 0, each add up to 4. The 5 sets of 2 cards that link to each other are the High Priest, card number 5, and Temperance, card number 14. Next are the Lovers, card number 6, and the Devil, card number 15. Then the Chariot, card number 7, and the Tower, card number 16, followed by Justice, card number 8, and the Star, card number 17, and finally the Hermit, card number 9, is linked to the Moon, card number 18. If a card is only numerically linked to a column or to a sequence card, its symbolism in the story may not be as significant as those cards, but often the linked cards do help to illuminate the symbolism of the more prominent cards. That's probably enough slightly confusing information for now. Look at the image of the grid of 21 cards on the Quantum Harry blog and on the Quantum Harry Facebook group. I also recommend watching the video version of this episode when it's available, so you can see the variety of symbols that can appear on different incarnations of the Tarot Major Arcana cards. Examining the tarot symbolism in the Harry Potter books just shows us again how clever J.K. Rowling was about constructing her massive, sprawling series. But in some cases, it also reveals again, as the examination of games in the books did, that she can be so dedicated to her patterns and symbolism, it doesn't always make a great deal of sense in the story. And in her eagerness to include this symbolism, it's possible to occasionally and inadvertently include a plot hole instead. You've been listening to Quantum Harry the Podcast, a podcast version of the book Quantum Harry, A Unified Theory of the Potterverse by B.L. Purdom. All music heard on Quantum Harry is composed and performed by B.L. Purdom. Whether you are streaming on iTunes, Stitcher, CastBox, or another podcatcher, please leave a rating and/or a comment and share episodes of Quantum Harry with your friends. Next time on Quantum Harry, episode 31, The Devil You Know. We begin to play J.K. Rowling's own private tarot game by examining some of the cards linked to the first book in the series, Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. I hope you'll join me.